In this video, we'll look at how a large single enterprise can create growth for Hedera, and also why Hedera is actually incentivized to have a high HBAR price. We'll first take a look at the data of an actual live enterprise use case on Hedera, and then take a look at implications on price. Now, if you look at the block explorer here, we can see that pretty much 90% of transactions come from a single topic, which belongs to Atma.io. Let's briefly understand what Atma.io is. Atma.io is a spin-off of Avery Dennison. Now, Avery Dennison is a Fortune 500 company that has a long history in materials and packaging. They essentially work with various large companies to manufacture, label, and identify their products. And we can see here on zoom.info their annual revenue is over $8 billion. Avery Dennison is part of the governing council of Hedera, which are a group of large enterprises which essentially own the Hedera network and drive growth of the network. Atma.io is a company created by Avery Dennison, where their solution essentially uses the Hedera network as part of its backend. Atma.io is what you call a digital product passport solution. Digital product passport is simply a way of tracking physical items throughout a supply chain by connecting unique digital identifiers. This gives transparent visibility of the product throughout the supply chain and solves various problems like efficiency, proving authenticity, sustainability, and enhancing engagement with end customers. Okay, so we know what problem it solves. What is the scale of the problem and what is the growth of this market? Well, first off, there is this EU regulation being pushed for all products to have a digital product passport. By 2026 to 2030, this is mandatory for all brands that want to sell in the EU. So pretty much every brand will need a DPP solution. In terms of cost, based on a study done by Boston Consulting Group, compared to a non-blockchain based DPP solution, tokenized DPP solutions can reduce costs by up to 20%. Now, 20% cost savings is absolutely massive for enterprise. The total market itself for DPPs are expected to grow at an almost 30% compound annual growth rate. 30% CAGR is extremely high growth for a market. Tech usually has a CAGR of around 10 to 15%, so 30% is massive. We also know other large enterprises have started tokenized DPP projects, for example, the Aura Consortium, which has all the top luxury brands. So we can expect the adoption of tokenized DPP solutions to grow significantly over the next couple of years. Okay, so now we know Atma is producing transactions on Hedera. We know what it is briefly. This is all cool and stuff, but what does it actually mean for price? So for this, we'll look at 4 different scenarios. We'll look at the revenue currently generated from Atma. We'll then look at the revenue generated from Atma at full deployment. And then what is the effect on HBAR price at full deployment? And then what is the effect on HBAR price from the Hedera Treasury grants? So currently we know that Atma.io is producing about 3.5 billion transactions per month on average. In dollar terms, this is about $350K per month. Now this $350K is split between the nodes of Hedera, the actual Hedera Treasury, and then stakers. Now we know that Hedera Treasury takes about 85% of these fees, and the rest is split between the nodes and staking. Based on previous data, if we assume that only 15% of the funds sent to Hedera Treasury are used to support the operations of Hedera itself, and the rest used for ecosystem grants, then Hedera itself is only taking about $40K home per month in revenue from Atma. Now, we don't know the exact costs to operate Hedera. Roughly, we estimate they're spending just over $1 million a month to keep everything running. So with $40K a month coming in from Atma, this only covers about 4% of their costs. Although keep in mind, this is just one use case, and data from Zoom Info suggests that they're actually generating $24 million annually in revenue, which would be more than enough to cover their operating costs. Now let's look at the revenue generated from Atma at full deployment. So Atma mentions they're able to connect about 30 billion products, and with 15 updates per life cycle of the product would mean they would be somewhere producing about 150 billion transactions per month. Now, under the same assumptions as the previous scenario, and assuming HBAR price stays the same, Hedera generates 12.8 million in monthly revenue, where 1.9 is what actually Hedera takes home, assuming the rest is used for ecosystem grants. This more than covers their operating costs. So we know the revenue from what is currently being done on Atma. We kind of get an idea of the revenue with Atma at full deployment. But what is the effect on HBAR price? So we know that 85% of the transaction fees are sent to the Hedera Treasury. This is then held in the Treasury for operations and until new grants are awarded. This means that HBAR is deflationary until the new grants are awarded. We also know that enterprise transaction fees are pegged to fiat. This is pegged to a very low cost that doesn't change no matter the HBAR price. Let's look at the deflationary aspect of that on this chart here. So this chart here is broken over 12 months, and we can see that as Atma transactions happen, the active circulating supply decreases, and with that, the HBAR price increases. Now, if you look at the value stored in the Hedera Treasury over the same period, we can see that Hedera's treasury value is increasing both from the increase in HBAR price and the volume of HBAR kept in the treasury. This means that Hedera has more dollars to spend to grow the ecosystem further via their grants, and also more dollars to fund their own operations. However, if you look at the orange line there, it shows that the change in value decreases. There seems to be a diminishing returns on the transactions for Hedera, because as Hedera price grows, the fiat flat fee uses less and less HBAR. So less and less HBAR is being sent to the treasury. So this means that deflation happens at a slower and slower rate. So there will be a point where the value in the treasury has reached an effective economic equilibrium as the monthly returns from the transactions move toward the asymptote of this graph. So hopefully that makes sense. But essentially, it's just a balancing act of collecting HBAR in the treasury, getting those returns, and then once it reaches that equilibrium point, they will probably decide that it's best to redistribute those returns to grow the ecosystem further. Now, at this point, once they release those ecosystem grants, then Hedera becomes an inflationary token. So now let's look at the effect on price when this happens. So on the chart here, the first 6 months is when the Hedera Treasury is collecting transaction fees. We can see that HBAR is deflationary here, as we can see that the price is growing and also the value in the Treasury is growing. Now in the 6 month here, they then decide to release HBARs from the Treasury, maybe because they, for whatever reason it is, they decided let's grow the ecosystem. This means that the active circulating supply is now growing, and then the HBAR price goes down over the next few months. So we can see in this way HBAR is inflating, and also the Hedera treasury value goes down as they are sending HBARs out of that treasury. Bear in mind, this doesn't take into account trading activity and is just a single use case on Hedera. There are a couple of assumptions here, but essentially the takeaway is that as HBAR adoption increases and transaction volume increases, the HBAR price grows. Hedera then has more dollars in their treasury to support their own operations and then use that dollars to grow the ecosystem further through ecosystem grants. So in this way, Hedera is actually incentivized to have a high HBAR price. But as the treasury funds are spent, HBAR turns from a deflationary coin into an inflationary coin and is essentially a balancing act between finding optimal growth for the ecosystem via the grants, but also collecting revenue. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, leave a comment below on any feedback or any questions you have. Hopefully all of that made sense to you. And yeah, just hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you next time.